we are going to talk more about Disney and their feminist agenda and why they can't keep shoving this garbage into Star Wars. Unbelievable. So we already know that they pretty much did everything they could to neuter Luke Skywalker, the great Jedi that we all knew and loved, basically was nowhere to be found in the sequel trilogy, which is unforgivable on every single level. So we've seen the fact that Rose gets marketed more than any terrible character in the history of the movie business. Have we ever seen a character this terrible and this bad, objectively bad, get this much marketing?
The overly diverse casting, something that's been painstakingly present in all 3 of the new Star Wars movies made under Disney. Things are so diverse and multicultural now, it's kind of distracting, if we're being honest. Starting with Kylo Ren, who's pretty much the embodiment of an emo millennial, and you could see the SJWs in the writer's room had a pretty clear agenda. Speaking of Luke, he's of course the only white male character who's not evil. He's shown as this old coot in this movie, which is fine, but I'm starting to think he's a bit of a scapegoat here. He represents what's left of good white males in the franchise, certainly. A demographic that in the real world has constantly been outcasted and shunned from our society.
John Boyega, who played the character of Finn, did a very good job and actually was a very likable character. And I feel bad for him because he had to play what was basically a white knight.
And what's really bad is that you can't see this obvious agenda-driven nonsense that has destroyed Star Wars.
So my subscribers will know I really do not like the sequel trilogy of Star Wars films. 7 and 8 are okay. 9 is absolute hot garbage. But the reason I don't like them is basically, genuine film criticisms, not made up political reasons like these films are overtly feminist and all the rest of this garbage that you have heard a lot of. So in today's video, we're going to look at how anti-SJWs and the reactionary right use the hatred, the backlash to The Last Jedi to push their political agenda and push their reactionary far-right politics onto the mainstream Star Wars community. And we're going to look at the legacy of that, because the legacy of it is very bad and very toxic, and it's how you get the Star Wars community today being these toxic reactionaries by and large. Not that that doesn't have a history going back to the first prequel film, but we're going to get into all that in the video. But also I'm excited to announce this video is also sponsored. So today's video is brought to you by Ground News. You guys will know I like to reference and cite, various different articles in my videos, and you will often see me analyze the political biases or slant these outlets have to see if we can totally trust what they're reporting. If you aren't from, a journalism or academic background like myself, it can often be hard to tell what outlet slants which way and how this might overall affect their coverage of a story. So this is why I'm excited to partner with Ground News, an app that makes staying informed and staying generally sane really, really easy. So Ground News is a news comparison platform that will show you how the big news stories are being covered by multiple sources, and it gives you the full story, enabling you to make your own conclusions. It has this really interesting blind spot feature that enables you to identify news that isn't being covered by sources in your bubble, helping you to see stories you wouldn't otherwise see. You guys know I'm a big proponent of being taught, critical thinking and media literacy. And I feel Ground News is an app that will help you develop these skills further. It's an indispensable tool for those who want to understand their own biases and understand the biases of others. You guys will know many political commentators such as myself get their videos constantly demonetized for covering serious issues. So please support Ground News for being a company that makes an indispensable product and is also willing to support political YouTubers like myself. Click on the link in the description to download the app. Now, if you want to follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter and Instagram, come join our Discord, come join our subreddit. All that stuff is in the description as well. Also support me on Patreon if you want to support my work continuing for the future. Also, thanks so much for the recent subscriber growth. For every 5k we get a new chocolate orange. Got 30k at the moment. We're chugging along to 35k. Help me build this chocolate orange pyramid. Now, I already touched on this slightly in the introduction, but like I said, I do not like the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Basically, what they thought while making this trilogy of films is that the Star Wars fans did not like the prequels. So they were going to do the complete opposite and basically ignore the prequels and also sort of rehash most of the OG trilogy. Like The Force Awakens is very similar to A New Hope. There's a lot of stuff pulled from The Empire Strikes Back in obviously The Last Jedi as well. And then The Rise of Skywalker, I guess it's, tiny bit more original. It's also awful. Now, I think that is the worst thing about these films, is that it acts like these films exist in a vacuum. There's barely any mention of the greater world out there in the Star Wars universe. There's barely any world building. The world building is actually pretty terrible. No real cool new planets, no new cool species, no new cool adventures in these places. And also having J.J. Abrams direct the first one and then the third one, and having someone else do the second one who didn't want to necessarily follow what J.J. Abrams had in store, just made the third one a complete mess, because it was essentially J.J. Abrams trying to make his episode 8 and 9 into one film, and it's so obvious where he is retconning stuff from the 8th movie. Not to mention that Rise of Skywalker's whole premise is ridiculous. Lazily making Rey a Palpatine with no prior build-up, and also just, a horrible exposition of Merry from Lord of the Rings talking about Sith magic. And then later in the book, it's revealed Rey's dad is a good clone of Palpatine. Oh my god, it's just so ridiculous. It's such a slap in the face to the fans. But I also find it really funny how these reactionaries like Rise of Skywalker more than The Last Jedi, because it retcons a lot of stuff. Also, J.J. Abrams' treatment of Kelly Marie Tran is pretty disgusting, to be honest, in that she's established as a main character, and then he just discards her in the next movie because he didn't create her, essentially. The best way I could describe Episode 9, it's if one of these anti-SJWs worked with the mod team at prequel memes to make this film. Again, hot garbage, one of the worst movies I've ever seen in the cinema, but overall, the trilogy is lacking a lot of what makes Star Wars very appealing to fans. And I think that's why the Clone Wars, Rebels, and The Mandalorian get so much right, and even films like Rogue One, and even to a lesser extent, the Han Solo movie, is because it's growing and expanding the universe we love. And I don't know about you guys, I like Star Wars because of all the cool world building it does. And I like how they all connect and everything, and I like how you can have people show up in Clone Wars and then show up in The Mandalorian. All that stuff is really cool, and Dave Filoni is obviously the successor to George Lucas, so I'm happy about all that stuff. So I thought I'd get that all out the way to sort of prove I do love Star Wars and I don't like the sequel trilogy. But now I'm going to get into how reactionaries essentially hijacked legit criticism of these movies, made it ridiculously political, and in essence just used them as a vehicle to push their reactionary politics. Now, it really came to a head in The Last Jedi, but we can't talk about that without talking about some of the backlash to The Force Awakens. Now, when The Force Awakens trailer debuted, you saw the character of Finn, played by John Boyega, wearing a stormtrooper outfit. Of course, we had never seen a black stormtrooper before, so then it got into a whole discussion with reactionaries, can you have a black stormtrooper? Now, of course, in a galaxy as diverse as Star Wars, you'd imagine that, of course, there are non-white stormtroopers, but this still got a lot of reactionaries very heated, talking about token diversity and making Star Wars woke. Now, to sum up a lot of this drama, there's a video by this guy called The Dave Cullen Show, titled Star Wars The Force Awakens, Feminist Propaganda. So this type of stuff did exist before The Last Jedi, but it is kind of hard to find. Essentially, they make points about Rey being the main character, and Finn, and other stuff about Han Solo and Kylo Ren, so I'm going to play you some clips and then get into it.
This isn't a proper review of the film. I do want to talk about the film in the context of the political correct Hollywood narrative that is infesting our media. John Boyega, who played the character of Finn, did a very good job and actually was a very likable character. And I feel bad for him because he had to play what was basically a white knight. Now, the political correctness and the feminism and all that begins very early on in the film when the character of Rey, the leading female character in the film, who is basically a man but cast with a female actress and given female gender pronouns, but it's a man, basically. This is the worrying thing for me, because people go on about, she's such a great role model, she's a strong, independent female character. This is ideological feminist indoctrination. So, basically what happens at the start of the film is that this male character, who is called Rey but is played by a female actress, okay, so she's a woman, she's getting attacked by these guys, and he runs over to try and save her, right? And he goes, oh, she doesn't need my help, because then she trances them, right? So, minor spoiler there. Now, so you're thinking, it's an immediate statement. You're getting bashed over the head with a political message that women are just as strong as men. A quote from J.J. Abrams in which he basically talks about how he used affirmative action, that little bit of diversity, so progressive. Diversity basically meaning that you have less white people depicted in politics, in education, in film, media, whatever the hell it is. We want less white people in a role, and in particular, less white men.
So essentially the main problem is that it is just another example of SJWs in Hollywood and token diversity, because any diversity to these guys is political. And can we talk about how ridiculous the notion of being anti-diversity in Star Wars is? A galaxy that has so many different species of aliens, and people are getting outraged that the humans in it might not all be white. It is really the most bizarre argument, because like with Star Trek and other things like that, we see like so many different aliens. Why do the humans have to be non-diverse and all white? It makes absolutely no sense. But they also say that in The Force Awakens, Finn is trying to be like a white knight, and Rey is the Mary Sue, where Finn is trying to save the girl and trying to do everything for her, but she don't need no man, she don't need any help. She's so badass anyway, she can handle it all herself. So they say Rey is a Mary Sue. Now I always find this criticism funny, because of course Rey is like this powerful female character, but there's nothing really different with her and say like Harry Potter or Luke Skywalker. They don't apply the same criticisms to Luke and Harry Potter as they do to Rey. It's kind of weird, obviously tainted by their views towards women. But by and large, many people did like The Force Awakens. It wasn't like a perfect movie, but the consensus among a lot of Star Wars fans was it was a decent first step, and they're excited about the future of this new trilogy. You didn't get many of these videos about Force feminism and SJW stuff, even when this was actually at the height of that stuff back in 2016. And then Last Jedi came out in Christmas time 2017, I believe, and it was so divisive, and the backlash was absolutely massive to this film for a variety of reasons. Personally, I didn't like it too much. It was okay. I felt they really limited themselves with making it take place over like a couple of hours, so it's really weird when Finn and Rose go to like another planet while their ship is being chased by this massive, like, you know, Imperial cruiser. I didn't like the fake out death of Luke only for him to die. Like, do it either one way or the other. I'd rather him go to the planet and then disappear as he's getting shot at. Because the fake out is really silly, because it's like, oh, okay, he wasn't actually there. But then he dies anyway. Again, I didn't really like that. I really like the Yoda stuff, though. That's one thing I did like. But the film was okay. It was kind of like a throwaway plot. You didn't need it, and it wasted a lot of time. Rian Johnson tried to do his own take on Star Wars, and I think he missed a lot of the things, like I said, that make Star Wars good. World building, interesting scenarios, and I think he really limited himself. And I don't think the characters and the storyline was that great. I like the Luke stuff. I like the Kylo Ren stuff. That's pretty much it. But you can see why people don't like this film, and that's totally fair enough. If you totally hate this film, I'm all on board with that. I don't really care, to be honest, about your opinion of this film. But this film wasn't bad because of left-wing politics. The sequel trilogy is some of like the most milquetoast centrism in films, about good versus evil. I've spoke about this a lot, but apparently the non-political Star Wars films, and these guys say the OG trilogy didn't have politics, these were inspired by the Vietnam War, where George Lucas says the Empire is America and the rebels are the NLF, or as you guys might know them, the Viet Cong.
Thing with Star Wars, if you think about it, the good guys are the rebels.
Viet Cong.
Exactly. So were you thinking of that at the time?
Yes.
Way more political in these instances, where these sequel trilogy films aren't, but of course you have some sort of, you know, anti-capitalist element with the stuff on the casino planet. But the point of this video is to show you how the reactionary right hijacked this stuff. They took a lot of this backlash and said to people, well, you know, the film was bad, but the reason it was ruined from the inside was people like Kathleen Kennedy forcing their left-wing political agenda, forcing their feminism on the movie, which made it worse as a result. Now, an infamous anti-SJW YouTuber called NoBS, his channel is pretty much dead now, but his video for me really showcases how nonsensical this stuff is and how ridiculous it is. But these were criticisms I saw from so many people. And basically what they did with the outrage is take it and be like, here is why, here is my far-right politics explaining why the film is bad. And sadly, because a lot of Star Wars fans are younger or more impressionable, a lot of people believe this stuff, and I'm going to outline later how it created a whole YouTube industry of just making up stuff and demonizing certain people based on political factors that they have made up essentially in their own heads. So there is so much ridiculous stuff in this video. It made me laugh, but also made me pretty depressed how many people feel this way. So let's start with the casting.
Let's start with the overly diverse casting, something that's been painstakingly present in all three of the new Star Wars movies made under Disney. Things are so diverse and multicultural now, it's kind of distracting, if we're being honest. Luckily, the cast is good in The Last Jedi. They're all talented actors, but unfortunately, they're not given much to work with here, story-wise. They do their best, but sometimes your best isn't good enough. One caveat to throw in there would, of course, be the demonization of white males, who in the new movies are almost exclusively all the villains and evil characters. And on the flip side, minorities and women are all the best and coolest characters, kind of overcompensating for the past.
So NoBS is saying, like a lot of other anti-SJWs, is this film is set out to demonize white men because Kylo Ren and Hux are the bad guys and Kylo Ren is like some emo millennial. I don't understand how that fits into Star Wars. While Rose, Finn are the good guys, and obviously the women as well are the good guys. Now, even though Luke is like one of the main characters in this film, is also the hero of this film, NoBS says that it shows the difference between the generations, and they even had to make Luke like grumpy and unlikable because of how strong this film's agenda against white men was.
He's shown as this old coot in this movie, which is fine, but I'm starting to think he's a bit of a scapegoat here. He represents what's left of good white males in the franchise, certainly. A demographic that in the real world has constantly been outcasted and shunned from our society, especially lately. Luke is a figure from the older generation, a generation that's slowly dying out and being taken over by over-diversity, PC culture, and SJWism.
So he goes more into the tokenization, supposedly, of minorities.
Next is Finn, the token black guy. Not much else to say about him but that, because he really doesn't bring much to the table in this movie, besides his boring and pointless casino subplot. Oh, he almost sacrifices himself in the end though, to save the resistance, but before he gets a chance to do anything significant, he's pushed out of the way and effectively cucked by his new girlfriend Rose, the token Asian in this movie, and probably its worst part. Rounding out the main cast, we got the token Latin man, pejoratively called Flyboy in this film. While Poe has more of a role in the actual main plot, him leading the resistance in the air with their space battles. Despite having a bigger role though, Poe is also ultimately cucked too, when he's not only constantly chastised for being brave and making bold moves on the battlefield.
So there he says that Finn is a token black guy, Rose is a token Asian, and Poe Dameron is a token Latino guy. But these guys think this film has left-wing politics for just including minorities in it. Again, in the Star Wars universe, which has like thousands of species of aliens, the problem these guys have with the film is that some of the main characters in The Last Jedi are not white. Again, totally ridiculous, and how is this some sort of left-wing agenda? Even if you're like one of these context people who's like, oh, The Witcher came from Poland, so most people should be white. Even if you're one of them, surely you can see in Star Wars, diverse humans would probably be extremely common if we have loads of races of aliens. Again, it's so ridiculous. But a focus of a lot of these guys' problem was on Laura Dern's character, Holdo. Now take a look what NoBS has to say about Holdo.
He's also kept out of the loop of the Resistance main battle plan by none other than Holdo, the literal pink-haired lesbian feminist in the movie. Again, not kidding. Played by Laura Dern, Admiral Holdo not only is another female in charge for the good guys, like General Leia, she's also pink-haired and hinted to have a romantic lesbian relationship with Leia, the other female that's leading the Resistance. Are you beginning to see the pattern here? White women lead the good guys, while emasculating their male cohorts. Couple that with Holdo's pink hair and lesbian background and her elitist attitude towards men, and well, it looks like Star Wars is becoming the social justice wars.
So where does this stuff even come from? How is Holdo a pink-haired feminist? Where is he getting that she is a lesbian as well? Like, these guys just make stuff up. So when does Holdo talk about overthrowing the space patriarchy or getting equality for all space human women? I don't understand how they think this character is a feminist. And they also, of course, have a problem because she's one of the leaders in the film, along with Princess Leia. So essentially the rebels are led by 3 white women and the bad guys are led by 2 white men. So therefore, this equals feminist film. Therefore, white men bad, but one of the main heroes of the film is an old white dude. So are you starting to see how these guys just use this stuff to push their politics? There is no indication this film has feminist messaging. There is no indication that a character like Holdo is from the LGBT community. There is no indication this film is trying to demonize white men. What these guys do with stuff like The Last of Us Part 2 as well, they think politics is the same as representation. And in some ways it is. But just having a diverse cast, just having women in leading roles and having men in villain roles doesn't prove anything. Fox News often has a diverse news panel. Does that mean Fox News pursues a leftist feminist agenda? Of course it doesn't. Representation does not always mean you are pushing some sort of left-wing message. And of course, what it does to his audience is redirect the outrage at this film being bad. Like, you can be someone like me who doesn't like it, feels the time constraints placed on it in the film are weird, who doesn't like the story, doesn't like the characters too much, who doesn't like the lack of connection with the rest of the franchise. You can, believe all that stuff, and that's totally fine. But people like this took this mass backlash and redirected it to something that didn't happen. So to these guys and to many people who hate this film, The Last Jedi was not ruined by a poor understanding of Star Wars or a poor, construction of story in relation to the other films. It was ruined because the director and the producers were so intent on pushing their left-wing political agenda, they purposely sabotaged the film, and they would make all the white males villains and all the white women heroes, and that is because they have an anti-male, anti-white agenda. Again, this is totally ridiculous, but then this plays into the demonization of Kathleen Kennedy, and we're going to get into the industry that started on YouTube from this stuff.
Need to get her political ideology and propaganda out of Star Wars, make Star Wars great again. Fire Kathleen Kennedy. Fire her 3 months ago. The sooner you get this disease out of Lucasfilm.
Business perspective, there's so much hate for her, it just makes sense for a changing of the guard.
At Disney, you've created this wham and respect mentality, and if you fire a strong, powerful woman that's had 3 movies that's all crossed $1 billion, even though she had literally nothing to do with any of that in terms of the success, all she's had to do is with the social engineering that.
So because Kathleen Kennedy is of course at the top of Lucasfilm, and she's a woman, and she wears shirts like the Force is female, they believe everything about the new Star Wars has been ruined by her and her feminist politics. And Rian Johnson is a happy collaborator with her. He will happily push this politics at the expense of the film. So these guys simply exist to push a political agenda. And again, to these guys, the extent of the political agenda is making the cast a bit diverse in a universe of millions of different species of aliens. Anti-SJW nerd channels and just general reactionary channels have been making videos on Kathleen Kennedy since this film ended its run in the cinemas. And basically what they do is just make stuff up. Kathleen Kennedy is getting fired today, tomorrow, last year, next year. She's being pushed out by the top of Disney. They're very unhappy with her because the fans didn't like The Last Jedi, even though it did really well at the box office like the other 2 films did as well. And more recently, they've made this whole rivalry where Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are at odds with Kathleen Kennedy because of politics, essentially. Kathleen Kennedy wants to make Star Wars more feminist, just like The Last Jedi, while Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are just for the fans. So take a look at this quick little montage to get the gist of what I'm talking about.
About Star Wars. And a lot of you are going to be, well, you're going to be, I think, overall happy, although a lot of this is quite disturbing. Top brass for not just Star Wars, but also Marvel and Pixar were also in on the call, but listening only. Likely at the request of Bob Iger, who wants their advice on how to fix this show. And yes, he does know it's a shit show. Evidence? The word that he wants Kathleen Kennedy out. He actually does, but nobody will take her job. Several have been approached but turned it down, including J.J. Abrams, who turned it down flat and didn't even hesitate.
However, behind the scenes over at Lucasfilm, many changes have been made by creators like George Lucas and even the Disney CEO, Bob Chapek. Recently, Kathleen Kennedy was fired from a major Star Wars project that was going to be a new Star Wars TV series to be released in 2022. Now, it's noted that one of the big reasons as to why Kathleen Kennedy was fired from the Star Wars project had to do with Kennedy hiring the wrong type of creators behind George Lucas's and Bob Chapek's back without any approval. However, when Kathleen Kennedy was running one of the most important Star Wars projects within her own universe at the time that she was planning, it's described that George Lucas had fired Kathleen Kennedy from such project that was said to involve actress Brie Larson, which at the time was considered Brie's second Star Wars project. Now, Kathleen Kennedy was ultimately fired by both George Lucas and Bob Chapek, the new Disney CEO, after attempting to actually drastically change the philosophy of Star Wars and trying to retcon the original trilogy movies through her new TV series for Disney Plus that was going to be set sometime before the events of episode.
Today, we are talking about a very juicy rumor coming out of Lucasfilm about a potential civil war brewing within the walls of Lucasfilm. And I believe this has a lot of credibility, considering it's something I have heard about what's going on at Lucasfilm in the previous months. When you have, what I have heard is you have the old school Star Wars, OG side at Lucasfilm. Then you have this new feminist side, this SJW side that Kathleen Kennedy has brought in. And when you have those two equations, it's almost logical to think that they're going to have a big problem at some point when it comes to the forward vision of Star Wars.
So these guys first used The Last Jedi to gain a massive reactionary audience, and now have invented these wild theories about what's going on in Lucasfilm. And it's essentially a battle between the left and the guys who are for the fans, the not SJW people who work there. Now, it's a total grift at this point, and what they're doing is using this situation to push their political agenda on their audience. So Geeks and Gamers is one of the worst, because this guy does have far-right politics, has a politics channel, has a politics sports channel, has a politics nerd channel, where he just constantly whines about this stuff, pushing his far-right political agenda. And if you're just some random dude who might not be that political, you might have been radicalized by these people because they pull you in with your genuine, outrage at The Last Jedi, your dissatisfaction with the sequel trilogy, and they redirect your anger, like I was saying, at fake politics that doesn't exist. So there's a guy called Mike Zero, and he's not a guy who will spam SJWs in his title, but he is a guy that will just make stuff up. So I'm looking at his latest couple of videos. So here are the titles. Kathleen Kennedy just got fired from Star Wars project. Jon Favreau finally fixed the sequel trilogy. Disney is planning to rehire Gina Carano. Kathleen Kennedy just betrayed George Lucas again. Jon Favreau just cancelled Kathleen Kennedy's Endgame. Jon Favreau plans to bring back Gina Carano. Kathleen Kennedy wants to fire Rosario Dawson. Kathleen Kennedy wants to rehire Gina Carano now. Now, this is over the last 2 weeks. And already he's contradicted himself. And I saw these American magazines which make up fake stories about the British royal family. I'll see if I can find the picture I'm thinking of. But this reminds me of that. They're literally just making stuff up all the time, talking about sources at Lucasfilm, talking about, supposed leaks, although it has never ever happened. Now, Mike Zero isn't essentially pushing an overt political agenda like some of the other channels, but other prominent anti-SJWs like Geeks and Gamers and all these other channels, they make the same type of stuff and they copy this guy as well. So what happens is the narrative is left-wing politics embodied by the feminist SJW Kathleen Kennedy is bad, she must be stopped, and our fan favourite Jon Favreau, the guy responsible for The Mandalorian, is stopping her in her tracks.
However, WDW Pro also details an internal power struggle over the control of Star Wars at Lucasfilm. The ongoing battle over Lucasfilm's direction continues, with Kathleen Kennedy and Jon Favreau factions fighting over the studio. It's fairly well known at this point that the beef between Kennedy and Iger is real, given that Iger essentially ignored her in his memoir.
Now, if you want to see how right-wing the Star Wars community have shifted, Look at the backlash to Gina Carano not getting her contract renewed by Disney. And of course, that's an important caveat, is that Disney said they didn't renew it. They didn't boot her off The Mandalorian Season 3 for having these, extreme conservative views about things like lockdowns, masks, obviously also transgender people, mocking them and everything. And now she's joined Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire. But these guys all got behind her, said it's, SJW politics ruining The Mandalorian. And you see with channels like this Mike Zero, Jon Favreau is the guy trying to get her back in. Of course, there's no evidence for him doing this. But again, they don't want to admit that, Jon Favreau could be part of this censorship, of this SJW agenda. It's the same way that Geeks and Gamers thought Zack Snyder shared their politics, and then he comes on their live stream, says he doesn't associate with Geeks and Gamers because of the hate content they make.
Really not affiliated with Geeks and Gamers as far as I'm concerned, and there's no room for hate.
What I just listened to Zack Snyder do to me, and I do believe he slandered me.
But the legacy of The Last Jedi is what we have today. This Star Wars fan ecosystem that is totally reliant on made up drama with a political flavour, and the political flavour is reactionary, anti-left politics, which have no basis in reality. Like I said, these guys don't actually have a problem with George Lucas, who has well-known leftist politics. They have no problem with the first Star Wars movie, inspired by the Vietnam War, where the Empire are actually inspired by the United States. They have no problem with this stuff, but supposedly when you put more diverse people in a Star Wars movie, that means you're basically pushing an anti-male, anti-white agenda that is really pro-SJW. And this messaging work, you can see through the popularities of nearly all the Star Wars channels at the moment, is that they just buy into this reactionary stuff. And can I just say to people who may have watched this video and might not be left-wing, regardless of what you think of my politics, these guys are lying to you. They're straight up lying to you. They make this stuff up. It's not real. Kathleen Kennedy has not been fired 100 times. Jon Favreau and Kathleen Kennedy aren't battling each other all the time. Kathleen Kennedy isn't making a Star Wars series with Brie Larson. Can you not just see how they're manipulating you? They're using people like Kathleen Kennedy and Brie Larson for clicks and for money. Because like I said in other videos, they construct the most bizarre narratives to keep you hooked. When they start this stuff, and it goes back to The Last Jedi, that's when the narrative began. They can keep going and going and going. And that's how they can keep pumping out the content. And that's how they can keep saying, there's a war in Lucasfilm. There's a war between Kathleen Kennedy and Dave Filoni. There's a war between all these people. And that started with The Last Jedi, with her trying to politicize the franchise. And it's never going to end. She's like this horrible dictator of Star Wars who just wants to use it as a vehicle for her feminism. And I'll just never get over the ridiculousness of it. The Clone Wars, Rebels, and Mandalorian, created and made by Dave Filoni and George Lucas to a lesser extent, especially the Clone Wars, these have political messages in them. They have serious political messages in them. And the prequels and the Clone Wars are literally about politics. Do you think George Lucas and Dave Filoni support modern American conservatism? Or can you get from the Clone Wars and from other stuff like that, the anti-authoritarianism, obviously the anti-war nature of a lot of these story arcs. But even if you say, I don't care if these guys are left-wing or not, they just make good stories about politics. But these guys use their politics to make their stories. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But the antithesis of these guys is the sequel trilogy. Because the politics of it are so centrist, so simple. There is barely any real political messaging. Because the First Order are so cartoonishly evil, they do not make a compelling bad guy. There's no commentary about the rise of authoritarianism. There's nothing really there with the First Order. It's not like the Empire, which they've delved into a bit deeper in the comic books, or the Clone Wars with the Confederacy against the Republic, where they delve into it a bit more and say, this is why these guys exist, and this is why guys might even support them. And then it outlines the argument why they might get support. The First Order is just ridiculous. And by the end, they have these super lasers attached to stuff where they just blow up planets for no reason. They just do it for no reason. It's not even the logic of the Death Star, where they will do it to keep the galaxy in line through fear. The First Order just go around doing it to anyone. So it's clear your only problem with the film is its use of diversity, and it's clear you guys have a far-right ideology if you see this diversity as a film having an anti-male, anti-white agenda, and you're putting your own paranoid beliefs on this film, like Holdo being a lesbian feminist, that is never established in the film. She barely even has much to say about stuff. Where are you getting this from? You're just making it up and projecting it, and it's no coincidence this Holdo character, her face was plastered all over these anti-SJW videos. So that is how The Last Jedi was used by these reactionaries to get them more involved in reactionary politics and essentially created an industry of misinformation and lies throughout the Star Wars community. And is there really any going back? Because yes, the backlash to Jake Lloyd in the prequels was bad, and it was bad. But I feel like online now, every Star Wars fan on YouTube is just a complete reactionary. There's basically like no sane, normal Star Wars fans who either aren't trying to push their right-wing political agenda onto you, or, you know, see the whole world through it and see every event as some sort of culture war battle, or, and they are grifters who like to lie so they can make money off YouTube. So anyway, let me know what you guys think of all this stuff in the comments. I'd be interested if any of you who aren't left-wing have actually seen how ridiculous this criticism is. If you want to follow me on social media, at the Kavernacle on Twitter and Instagram. Come join the communities at Discord and my subreddit, that's in the description as well. Please go check out the app from Ground News. It is very helpful. I actually use it before they sponsored my video, so that was really cool. Also support me on Patreon if you feel like supporting my channel for the future. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.